tied to the whipping post in her wedding dress. A Lakota chief cut her free and wed her right. The rope was fraying where it met the post. That's the first thing I noticed. Whoever tied her didn't know knots, just looped it too many times. The way a frightened man does, trying to make up in quantity what he lacked in knowing. She'd been pulling at it. The skin on her wrists was raw through the white lace. I sat my horse and looked at her for a moment before she heard me coming. She didn't look at the ground. That's the thing I remember most clearly from those first seconds. Every woman I had ever seen put on a post, and I had seen it too many times. White settlers doing to each other what they accused us of doing. Looked at the ground, head down, shame folded over them like a second body. This one had her chin up. Her eyes were going slow and deliberate across the edge of the tree line, as if she were making a count of something, as if she were deciding something. The dress was ruined. It must have been white once. Now it was the color of the road dust, because they'd dragged her to the post, not walked her. There was a dark tear across the bodice, where something had caught and pulled, and the hem was brown from the ground. Her hair had come most of the way out of whatever arrangement a wedding required. It hung across one shoulder in a dark red tangle. I did not know her name yet. I didn't need it to understand what had happened. A woman in a wedding dress, tied to the post in the center of town, the town itself conspicuously empty, doors shut, windows blank, meant that the man who was to have married her had done the tying. The town being empty meant they agreed with him, or feared him, which amounts to the same thing. I came down off my horse. The sound of my boots on the packed earth is what turned her head. She looked at me the way a woman looks at an approaching man when she has already decided she will not show fear. That particular stillness where the eyes go very clear and the body stays exactly where it is. I had a knife on my belt. I took it out slowly and I watched her watch it. She did not flinch. I reached past her and cut the rope. She didn't fall. I had half expected she would, from the time on her feet, and the wrists and the sun. But she stepped away from the post with a steadiness that told me she had been holding herself together by will alone for a while, and that will was not going anywhere. She looked at the cut ends of the rope. She looked at me. There were dried tear tracks on her face, but her eyes were dry now. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was steady too. I nodded, the knife back on my belt. I looked at the town that wasn't watching and wasn't helping, and I felt the old settled weight of contempt that I had carried so long. It didn't feel like anything anymore. Just a permanence in my chest, like a stone that had always been there. I said, "You have somewhere to go." It wasn't a question. It was, I suppose, an invitation to tell me the shape of her situation, and she understood it that way. She looked at the road going west. Then she looked at the road going east. Then she looked at me. "No," she said, "not anymore. My name is Lakota. My father was Red Cloud's cousin, which means less than it once did, and more than men like to admit. I was chief of a band of 31 people. 31 as of that morning, before I came into the town of Harlan's Crossing to trade 2 horses and a winter's worth of dried elk. I was 53 years old. My wife had been dead for 6 years. My daughter had gone east to the school, which I had allowed because she asked me to, and because I knew that the world coming was not the world I had grown up in, and I would not clip her wings to spare myself the loneliness. I was not a lonely man. Loneliness is when you miss what you should have. I had stopped feeling the ache of the empty tippy in the way that breaks men. What I had was something quieter, a kind of wide, flat distance in myself, that I had accepted the way you accept the color of your eyes. It was just the shape of things now. I had not expected to cut a woman off a post that morning. I had not expected a great many things. Her name was Nora Callahan. She told me that while I gave her water from my canteen and she drank it without embarrassment, which is a small thing but told me something about her. She was 28 years old. She had come west from Missouri 2 years before with her uncle, who had died of fever the previous winter, and she had been keeping the homestead east of town since then. which is a thing that demands a specific kind of woman. Not soft, not given to panic, comfortable with silence and hard work and making do. The man who was to have married her was named Curtis Bowman. He had land and cattle and a reputation in the territory for being a man who kept his word. She had accepted his proposal in March and had understood it to be the practical arrangement it was. She had the homestead, he had the water rights she needed, and they were both past the age of romantic nonsense. She said this plainly, without self-pity. Then what happened? I said. She was quiet for a moment. She was looking at her wrists. She had wrapped in a strip she'd torn from the hem of the dress. He found out I'd gone to the Lakota camp 2 winters ago, she said, when the fever was going through. I had quinine. I brought it. I remembered that. I had not been there. I had been in the north with half the band, chasing the last of the elk before the hard snows. But I had heard about the white woman who had come to the camp when the fever was taking children. My second cousin's youngest boy had lived. I had never known her name. He said a woman who'd slept in a Lakota camp was no wife for a decent man, she said. There it was. And the town, I said. The town agrees. She said it without heat, which made it worse. Or close enough to the same thing. I stood up from where I'd been crouching beside her, and I looked down the long, empty street, and I understood the arithmetic of her situation with perfect clarity. The homestead east of town was already probably forfeit. Bowman would find a way. The way men with lawyers always find a way. She had no family. She had no money that I knew of. She had a ruined dress and 2 raw wrists, and the specific problem of being a woman in a territory that had no use for her and a grudge against her. She looked up at me. The sun was behind me and she was squinting a little, but she held my gaze. You came to trade horses, she said. Yes. Did you get a good price? I haven't traded yet. She nodded at that. She seemed to be thinking something through. Then she said, I don't suppose you need a woman who can set a bone, stitch a wound, and put up 40 jars of preserves in a day. I looked at her for a long time. I might, I said. I want to tell this right, because there is a version of this story that a man tells to make himself sound generous, and that is not the version that is true. The truth is, I could have pointed her toward the next town and told her to find a church and left her to the charity of strangers. I could have given her a horse and a week's food and considered my debt to decency paid. Could have done a great number of things that cost me less. I took her back with me because she would have died otherwise. That is the honest start of it. Not the whole of it, but the start. The band was camped 2 days east of Harlan's Crossing in the Creek Valley I had used every autumn for 15 years. We arrived at dusk, and I will tell you plainly that the arrival was not easy. Not because my people were unkind. They were not, mostly, but because the situation had no clean shape. A white woman in a wedding dress, arriving in a Lakota camp on the back of a spare horse, with the chief saying only, she will stay with us a while. There were opinions. My mother's sister, who had never in her life kept an opinion to herself, said to me in Lakota, directly in front of Nora, that I had enough problems without borrowing white ones. She understands Lakota, I said. My mother's sister looked at Nora. Nora said, in careful, scented real Lakota, I won't be trouble. I can work. I'll earn my place or I won't stay. My mother's sister was quiet for a moment. Then she said, also in Lakota to me, her accent is terrible. And she turned and went to her teepee, which, for my mother's sister, was very nearly a welcome. I gave Nora a tippy and a change of clothes because the dress was done. She folded what was left of it carefully and put it in a bag she kept at the back of the teepee, and I did not ask why. Some things a person holds onto, not because they are happy memories, but because they are the place where the old life ended and the new one began. And you need to be able to point to it. The first week, she was quiet and watchful in the way of someone who is learning the rules of a new place. By devotion, she worked. She went where she was useful and did what was needed without being asked twice. She was good at the fire. She was good at the horses in a way I hadn't expected. The way someone is good who learned it young, rather than who learned it recently. My nephew was 12 and fancied himself very important with horses. Watched her handle the bay mare, who liked to pretend to be more trouble than she was, and then came to find me and said, with the absolute seriousness of a 12-year-old, "She's good." As if I had asked for his assessment. There was a man in the band named Garrett Crow Standing, who was half white on his father's side, and had never quite settled into a clean place in himself because of it. And who saw in Nora's presence an opportunity for the kind of cruelty that comes from recognizing your own wound in someone else. He said things within earshot. He made the kind of comments about white women in Lakota camps that needed no translation. I took him to the edge of camp one morning, and I told him very quietly that what came out of his mouth concerning the woman was going to stop, and that if it didn't stop, I was going to hear about it, and if I heard about it, there would be a consequence he would not enjoy. I was not angry when I said this. Anger is for men who aren't sure seeing what they're saying. I was certain, which is different, and he heard the difference. He stopped. This is one of the things a man in my position carries. Not just the capability to protect, but the willingness to make that capability clear and plain. There is no dignity in a protection that is invisible. The woman in my camp needed to know she was safe. Everyone in my camp needed to know I meant it. The protection only works if it is known. Told Nora what I had done. Not the whole conversation, just that I had spoken to him. She was quiet for a moment, doing something with a piece of harness. "Thank you," she said. The same words as the first time, but not the same weight. October came, and with it the cold that comes to the plains, like something that has been waiting all year for its turn. We moved camp twice, following the creek south, and Nora moved with us as if she had always known how to pack a camp and move it in a morning. She and my mother's sister had reached the particular understanding that two stubborn women reach when they realize they respect each other. Not warm, not hostile, just a kind of level working arrangement that was better than most relationships I had observed. I was watching Nora one evening, when I thought she wasn't aware of it. She was helping my mother's sister with the evening cooking, and they were talking in that easy half Lakota, half English mix that had developed between them. Nora's Lakota improving daily. My mother's sister's English progressing more slowly, but more than she would ever admit. The fire was going well, and the light from it was on Nora's face, and she was laughing at something. A real laugh that she didn't appear to decide to do first, and I thought, there she is. That is the real woman, the one underneath the careful composure. She caught me looking. I turned my eyes away. I was not quick enough. The next morning she came and found me where I was working on the corral fence. She stood close enough to speak quietly and said, "I want to ask you something and I'd like a plain answer." All right. What am I to you here?" I sat down the fence rail and I looked at her. She was looking at me with that particular clarity of hers. The same look she had given me at the post, the chin up, the eyes clear, the body still. "What do you mean?" I said. Though I understood the question. "I mean, do you want something from me? Beyond the work?" She said it without flinching, the way a woman says something she needs to know, and has decided that knowing it, whatever the answer is better than not knowing. I was quiet for a moment. There was a right answer and there was the true answer, and they were the same answer. I wanted to find the words for it. "I don't want anything from you that you don't give freely," I said. "That's not a careful answer. That's just what's true." She was quiet. Then she said, "There are men who say that. I know. And don't mean it. I know." She was looking at me. "You mean it." It wasn't a question exactly. She was looking at me the way she looked at the tree line that first day, making a count of something, deciding something. I held her gaze and I let her decide. "Yes," I said. "I mean it." She nodded slowly, turned and went back to whatever she'd been doing. I went back to the fence. But something had moved in me. Something that had been in the flat, wide, quiet distance since before I could remember it otherwise. Something had moved, and I noted it, and I said nothing to anyone, and I went on with my day. The man Bowman came in November. I had known he would eventually. Men who tie women to posts do not generally let the matter end there, especially when the matter involves land and water rights that were part of a marriage agreement that has now dissolved in an embarrassing way for everyone except the woman. Bowman would need the situation remedied. He came with two men I didn't know, and a third I did, a deputy named Carson, who had been through my camp twice in 10 years, and who was, in the way of some lawmen, not cruel, but not willing to pick a side until he saw which side was winning. They came in the middle of the day, is the confident man's choice. Not looking for a fight, just planning to be unmistakably clear about his position and take the woman and go. I was standing at the entrance to camp when they rode in. I had been there for 15 minutes because one of my boys had spotted them coming and told me, and I had gone to stand where I would be the first thing they saw. Bowman pulled up his horse 10 feet from me. He was a large man, wide in the shoulders, a good coat, a good horse. The kind of man who has had his way in things long enough that he wears it in the way he holds himself, like a fact about the world rather than a thing he's had to maintain. He looked at me with the particular blankness men of his type use when they are talking to someone they have decided is beneath consideration. "I'm looking for a woman named Nora Callahan," he said. "She is my property." "She is not your property," I said. He looked at me a moment longer, then he said, almost gently, the way a man explains a thing to a child, "She has goods of mine on the homestead. There's a legal matter." "There is no legal matter that requires you to come to my camp. I need to speak with the woman." "No." He straightened in his saddle. His two men moved slightly, the way men move when their employer is being frustrated, not reaching for anything yet, just adjusting their positions. "You have no authority here," Bowman said. I let that sit, then I said, "This is my camp. I have authority over everything in it." I looked at his two men. I looked at Deputy Carson. I looked at Bowman. "You rode a long way to be told no. I'd suggest you ride back." Carson spoke up. "Dakota, the man has a legal claim to." "The man tied a woman to a post in a wedding dress because she brought medicine to Lakota children," I said. "I will not hear about his legal claims." Silence. Bowman's face changed, not into anger, into something colder and more deliberate. He said, "This woman has made herself your concern, and that's fine. She can come out here and tell me herself she's staying, and I'll go." I turned my head, and Nora was already there. She had come out of the camp and was standing behind me, and to my left, close enough that I could hear her breathing. Bowman looked at her. She looked at him. "I'm staying," she said. "Nora, I'm staying." She said it the second time, without inflection, without heat, without any visible emotion whatsoever, and that lack of emotion was more final than anything else she could have put into it. Bowman looked at her a long time. Then he looked at me. I held his gaze with the same patience I use for weather. "It will do what it does, and I will still be here when it passes." He pulled his horse around. His two men followed. Deputy Carson lingered a moment, looking between me and Nora, and then he turned and followed too. I listened to them go. Behind me, Nora let out a breath. One long, slow breath, like water over a weir. I didn't turn around immediately. I waited until was sure they were out of earshot. Then I turned. She was standing with her arms crossed over her chest. It was not a cold posture, but a holding herself together posture. And she was looking at the ground. Not in shame, in something more like the aftermath of something hard. I said, "It's done." She looked up. "For now," she said. "For now," I agreed. He got what he came for. He needed to see where he stood. She was looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her yet. "You were ready for that," she said. "You were standing there before they came." "Yes." She was quiet. Something was moving through her face that she was working to keep still. "Thank you," she said. Third time. Different weight again. I nodded. Turned to go back to what I'd been doing. "Dakota." I stopped. She stopped. Started again. "I would like to repay what I owe here. Not with leaving. I don't want to leave. But with, she makes a small, frustrated gesture at the air. I don't have a word for it in Lakota. Try English, I said. With belonging here, she said. With being someone who has a place here. Not a debt, a place. I looked at her. You have a place, I said. You've had one since you came. Something shifted in her face. Not falling apart. Not overwhelming. Just a single crack in the careful surface, and through it, something clear and real. Then I'd like it to be a real place, she said, not just a kindness. I understood what she was saying. I understood exactly. We should talk about that, I said. Yes, she said. We should. We talked about it over 4 days. Not in one long conversation. Neither of us was built for long conversations. But in pieces, truth, in the margins of the workdays, at the edge of the fire in the evenings. We talked about the way two practical people talk about a thing that matters, which means plainly and without performance. She knew what a marriage between a white woman and a Lakota chief meant in the world as it existed. She knew it closed doors. She did not care about the doors it closed. She said this without drama, as a simple accounting. These doors are already closed, and these other doors don't interest me. I said I knew what I was asking her, and she said I hadn't asked her, and I said that was fair, and I asked her. She said yes. My mother's sister performed the ceremony. She had very strong opinions about how it should be done, and she expressed all of them at length. And I let her, because she was right about most of them. There was no white wedding dress. There was a dress that had belonged to my wife, which my mother's sister had kept, and which she brought out and laid in Nora's arms, with a ceremony and a weight that I did not expect from her, and which told me more about what my mother's sister thought of Nora than anything she had said. Nora held it for a long time. Then she looked at my mother's sister and said, "In Lakota, that was better every week. I'll wear it with respect." My mother's sister made a sound that in her meant, "Yes, you will, or you'll answer to me," which was as warm as she got. We married at dawn, because that was right. New light, new thing. My nephew held the horses. There were 30 people watching, which is everyone, and every one of them was there by choice, which is the only way I wanted it. I won't tell you everything that was said, because some things are not for the telling. I will tell you that when it was done, Nora took my face in both her hands, her palms flat against my jaw, her thumbs at my cheekbones, and she looked at me the way she had looked at the tree line that first morning, making her count, making her decision, except that the decision was already made, and now she was just seeing me, just looking at me in the clear, deliberate way of hers. And I understood what she was seeing. Not the chief, not the protector, not the man who had cut a rope. She was seeing me, Lakota, 53 years old, flat, wide, quiet distance in him that was not there the way it used to be, and she was choosing it. All of it. I put my hands over hers. Around us, someone started to sing. I don't know who. Then more voices joined, and the sound of it went up into the cold dawn air and out over the creek, and the horses lifted their heads to listen. That was 11 years ago. I'll tell you where we are now because it matters. The band is 47 people. 2 of them are mine and Nora's. A daughter who is 9 and who rides better than most men I know, and a son who is 6 and who has his mother's red hair, and, God help everyone around him, his mother's stubbornness. Nora is still good at the fire. She is still good at the horses. She can set a bone as well as anyone I have ever seen, and in the years since the marriage she has done it for Lakota, and settlers both, because that is who she is. She doesn't make the distinction. The homestead east of Harlan's Crossing belongs to someone else now. Bowman's tried once more the following spring, and Deputy Carson came out not to threaten, but ask quietly, person to person, what it would take to settle the matter. I told him. He went back to town. 3 months later, a paper arrived saying the homestead had been transferred to a land company. I cannot say I was surprised, and Nora, when she read it, folded it in half and set it down and went back to what she was doing. There are men who will tell you that a chief who married a white woman had lost something, They say it in the careful way of men who won't say it to your face. Let them say it. I know what I lost and what I found. What I know is this. I am the man who was needed. I am the man who stood between her and the thing that would have destroyed her and who did not move. I am the man she chose, with full knowledge of what choosing meant, and she made that choice again every year of the 11 that have followed. I have been the rock that this family leans against, and the rock has not moved. That is not a small thing to know about yourself. When you have spent enough years in the wide flat distance, believing that the shape of your life is simply how it is, that is not a small thing. Some evenings I sit outside and I watch the horses, and Nora comes and sits beside me and we don't always talk. Sometimes we just watch the horses and listen to the dark coming in. My daughter falls asleep against me. My son is usually still running somewhere until someone collects him. The creek sounds the same as it always has. The stars are the same stars. The man sitting under them is not the same man who rode into Harlan's Crossing looking to trade horses. Sitting under them has his full weight back, has his worth back, not given to him by anyone. Not something I needed confirmed, but seen, plainly, clearly seen, by a woman who looked at me with her hands on my face and knew exactly what she was choosing. That is enough for any man. More than enough.